Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in for today's webinar presentation. Today, we're taking a look at the payment processing and reconciliation processes in Roomkey. So a bit of an outline for today's webinar presentation. We'll start with some introductions. Then we'll take a look at the processing methods that are available for different clients, depending on the different interfaces and the different ways that different processing tools that you use. Depending on those different methods, we'll look at payment, authorization, and settlements. Then we'll look at reversing, adjusting, and voiding processes as well. And then we'll also take a look at the different reconciliation processes and reporting tools that are available to you in Roomkey. We'll also take a moment to talk about a little bit about processor portals. Those are separate from Roomkey. Then we'll wrap up today's presentation with a summary and Q&A. So for our introductions today, my name is Tasha Leclerc. I'm a trainer and implementation specialist with Roomkey. Joining me today, I do have our Director of Customer Experience, Mr. William Tam. I'll be leading today's presentation and the demonstrations on screen, and William will oversee the Q&A function inside the webinar presentation. Everyone joining today's live presentation is on mute, but if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and click the Q&A button in the webinar. You can type out a question. William will be able to answer. And if any of those questions are left over towards the end of the presentation, we can include those in the Q&A section as well. Couple more things about today's webinar. It is being recorded, so you will receive a notification at the top of this presentation that it's being recorded. That recording will be made available on our support website later this week. And if you are not able to join today's presentation, you can review that recording afterwards as well. One more thing to note is that for those of you that are joining today's live presentation, we do have a webinar survey that we ask for your feedback. If you do have any comments or suggestions for new topics in the future, we're always happy to hear about any new suggestions. So getting us started with the different processing methods that are available with Roomkey, I've got the three outlined here. The first one we're looking at is the manual credit card processor. This is a standalone credit card machine that is not connected to Roomkey. So all of the processes are performed manually with a standalone machine, usually a debit machine. Some of our clients use Clover or Moneris as separate processors outside of Roomkey. The next type of processing method is a third-party interface processor. The example I have here is Shift4. That is a processor that is connected to Roomkey for processing payments and refunds, but it does still have some manual components included with it as well. Lastly, we also have our embedded payment processor solution that's available for our US-based and Canada-based clients. This is our Roomkey PMS Payments product, which is fully embedded for payment processing and reconciliation. So we'll see how these three can compare as we go through our different topics today. Starting with payments, authorizations, and settlements, I just want to take a moment to clearly define what these three terms mean as it relates to Roomkey. So, a payment is money that is removed from the cardholder account. So, these funds are taken from a credit card account and recorded in Roomkey. An authorization is a hold that is placed on money in the cardholder account. The money is not removed from the account, but the account holder will see that a transaction is pending or maybe a hold has been placed on those funds in their account. A settlement is money that has been placed on hold is removed from the cardholder account. So any money that is authorized, when you settle an authorization, it effectively becomes a payment because those funds are then removed from the cardholder account. Now, keeping these three definitions in mind, let's take a look at these different processes as they relate to our different methods of processing credit cards. The first one is how to take a payment. And we're going to look at the process that is required when you use a standalone credit card processing machine. The first step is to use the standalone machine to process a payment. So you're going to use the machine itself to record the payment. Once the payment is processed using the standalone machine, you'll typically receive a receipt with an authorization code or auth code or approval code on that receipt. In Roomkey, the next step is to record that payment with the auth code or approval code directly in Roomkey. So I have a little video that'll show us how to do this. In this example, the guest has a prepaid reservation. You can see here in the reservation note, room and tax is prepaid on Folio 8 using the virtual credit card. So you'll use that virtual credit card with the credit card processor. And now in Roomkey, we want to record that payment here on the folio. So you'll click the post payment button. Here it will show you the payment method on file, and I'll just make sure it's going to folio 8 per the reservation note, and the amount that was processed, and the authorization code. That authorization space is used for that approval code from the credit card machine, and you click OK, exit. Now you'll see that as a payment as a line item here on the guest folio. You can right click on the payment line item and select credit card info, and that will give you the details of that credit card. So, credit card number and the authorization code that we recorded from the standalone machine. Great. So, taking a payment with a manual processor is a two-step process between the machine and then recording that in Roomkey. Next, we're going to take a look at our interfaced and embedded solutions here. Now, the process is the same. To take a payment in Roomkey, you're going to use the post payment button to process the payment. So because these third-party interfaces or our embedded solution are incorporated, connected to Roomkey, we don't need to do anything separate outside of Roomkey. We can perform the action directly in Roomkey itself. So this video is going to show us how to do that using the post payment button. So this is a similar scenario where this is a prepaid reservation where room and tax is prepaid using the Expedia virtual credit card on file. Here in the guest folio, we'll see that payment has not yet been recorded. So you'll go directly to the post payment button. That's going to pull through the payment information, the credit card on file, and we can enter the amount that we're going to process for this prepayment. You'll select OK, exit. Next, you'll see the payment interface window up here. This is going to let you know that this is going to settle the full amount to the credit card, and you click Post. This will just take a moment, but you'll receive the approval message here in Roomkey letting you know the authorization code and a transaction ID. Now that that's been recorded, we can see that appear as a line item on the guest folio. You can right click on that line item, click the credit card info, and that will now show you the details of that credit card payment, including the authorization number and the transaction ID. Now let's take a look at how to process an authorization. Now, one thing to note with a manual or standalone credit card machine, these authorizations are not technically recorded in Roomkey as an authorization. What we are doing instead is managing the credit limit manually on the guest reservation in Roomkey. So when you take an authorization using a standalone machine, you're going to authorize the credit card using the machine itself. And once that authorization is approved, you will receive an authorization receipt. And what I typically recommend our clients to do is staple that authorization receipt directly to the guest registration card, which is filed at the front desk. That just gives you a more concrete record of that authorization so that it can be used to refer to and review whenever you are managing the credit limit in Roomkey itself. Once you have authorized the credit card on the standalone credit card machine, the next thing that you'll do is manually record the guest credit limit in Roomkey. And I have a little video here that'll show you how to do that. So for this guest, on their folio, we can see that they have a charge has already appeared for their stay, and their available credit is actually in negative, so it's showing up in brackets. What we need to do is authorize the guest credit limit so that it covers this amount, 153.90. So you'll go to the transactions menu and you'll select guest folio credit limit. Here in the window, pop-up window, you'll be able to add credit. Now, you might just authorize for the amount on file, or some properties will increase this for an extra $100, for example. So this will bring it up to 253.90. Then you can click post. What you'll notice here is that the available credit now increases to an extra $100. Now, in Roomkey, we are not um, recording the authorization or approval code from that manual authorization, and that is why we have the tip recommendation to staple the authorization receipt to the guest reg card so that you do have a record of that approval available at the front desk there. Great. Now let's take a look at what that authorization process looks like whenever you have an interfaced or embedded solution with Roomkey PMS payments. To take an authorization, we actually have two options that we can perform depending on when you are authorizing the guest credit. So the first option is to authorize a guest credit card at check-in. This is included in the check-in process. Part of your property settings allows you to determine if you would like to authorize for room and tax at the time of check-in. And what we'll see in this video is that we are also able to add in an additional amount. So for this guest, is in our arrival screen, we're going to start the check-in process by clicking the check-in button. Now, this database is set up to authorize for room and tax automatically. And here in the available credit field, this allows me to add additional $100 whenever I click check in. So the next window that pops up here is the payments window showing me that I'm going to be authorizing for the full room and tax plus $100. So the total amount is going to be $836 using the credit card on file for this guest. Now, if you have a device connected, you will be able to send this to the device so the guest can actually enter in their chip and PIN. In this example, I'm just going to click post and I'll receive that approval message here. With the authorization code and the transaction ID, I can simply select OK. And now I can see that the guest is checked in. If I take a look at their folio, the room charge has posted, but there is no authorization line item because that is not yet removed from the guest account. So I'd just go up to the transactions menu, select authorize transactions, and that is where I can see the authorization or that hold that has been placed on the guest credit card. Of course, down here in the folio summary, I can also see a summarization of the available credit. So that is how to authorize a credit card at check-in. Now let's look at how you can increase authorization after check-in. So in this case, I have a guest who is already checked in-house, and we have some room charges that'll post throughout their stay. But if you take a look here in the summary, I actually have no credit available. And this hotel's policy is to always have a $100 credit available for incidentals. So I'm going to go to the transactions menu, select guest folio credit limit, and this is now going to allow me to increase the available credit. So I'm going to enter in $100 and select post. This will now enable my payment window, and this lets me know that I'm going to be authorizing. I'm going to increase the total authorization to $1,020 for this guest card and click post. I get my approval message here on screen with my authorization code, my transaction ID, and I can click OK. Thanks. Now you can see in the summary, I now have $100 in addition to over and above the room and tax available. Now I can check on that authorization. If you go to transactions and authorized transactions, I can now see that record here of that total amount authorized on the guest card with the authorization code recorded in Roomkey. So the next thing that we're going to look at is how to settle an authorization. Just a quick reminder, when you settle an authorization, that is effectively turning an authorization into a payment. So again, because this is has to do with an authorization, when you are working with a manual credit card processor or the standalone credit card machine, you'll want to use the machine to settle the authorization directly. And that's where it is always good practice to review the auth receipt that was produced and attached to the guest reg card or refer back to that authorization code. Now, because you're settling an authorization, to record that in Roomkey, you'll actually record it as a payment and you'll record that authorization code directly in Roomkey as well. So this step two, I have a little video that'll show us once again how to record this as a payment with an auth code in Roomkey. So here in Roomkey, I have this guest, Kevin Walters. I'm going to click post payment. Here is the payment information on file. I'll confirm the amount is correct, and I'll enter in the authorization number from that authorization receipt and click OK Exit. That now records it as a payment line item on the guest folio. And when I right click, you can select credit card info and you can review the details of that credit card payment there, including that authorization number. Excellent. So just a reminder, when you're managing authorizations or settling an authorization with that manual processor, you'll perform that action with the standalone machine first, and then you'll record it as a payment in Roomkey with that authorization code directly in Roomkey itself as a payment item. Now, to settle an authorization with an interface or embedded payment solution, we have two options. Now, you can settle an authorization manually through the room key itself. What this will do is record it as a payment on the guest folio, and it will leave the guest in-house with that settled authorization recorded as a payment line item. Now, the other more commonly used option is to settle an authorization automatically at checkout. Let's take a look at settling an authorization manually first. So here in this record, we have a guest reservation with a room charge on file, and we have credit that is already on file as well, with an additional $100 available for incidentals. To manage the authorization, you'll go to the transactions menu and select authorized transactions. And this is where you will see that full authorization for $560. Now, what you'll notice is that when you click settle, if the amount does not match, or if it's different than the folio balance, which in this case is 460, when you click OK, it will actually change the amount to the folio amount instead. So here, when our payment window pops up, it will now show that we're settling just for the outstanding amount, $460. And you'll click post. You'll get your approval message pop up here when that is approved, and you can just exit out of this authorized window. You'll click refresh on this guest folio here, and you'll now see that payment appears on screen. You can right click on the payment line item and select credit card info to view the details of that payment, including the authorization and transaction ID. Now, just to review that authorized transaction, back here in the transactions menu, you'll still see that transaction recorded here, but you'll notice that it is now marked as closed, and you no longer have the ability to settle or void because that authorization has been closed per the settlement. Basically, you've used that authorization amount to now record that $460 payment on the guest folio. Now let's take a look at how to settle an authorization automatically at checkout. This video will show that process using the checkout button. There we go. So we have this guest, James Browning. I can see on his folio he has some outstanding room charges for his stay. We're going to go and click the checkout button or F6 on your keyboard to complete the checkout. Once the checkout window pops up, we'll see the outstanding balance, including and the payment method on file for this guest. You can simply click the checkout button, and this will enable our payment processing window. We can see here that we're going to be settling the full amount, and you can click post. You'll receive your approval message directly here in Roomkey. You can click OK, and you'll also receive confirmation that the guest was successfully checked out of that room. You can click OK. And then to review that checked out reservation, I'll just move over to the checked out screen here, select the guest and click the folio. And if I scroll down to the bottom, this is where I'll see that payment that was processed as part of the checkout. I'll just right click on the payment and select, oh, let me just try that again, select credit card info. And this is where I can now see the authorization number and transaction ID for that payment. Essentially, a settled authorization there. So with these interface solutions, that process of settling an authorization becomes a lot smoother, and you have a couple more options to do so manually or automatically as part of the checkout process. Now let's take a look at some other types of functions that you may perform when you are managing credit cards and guest interactions. So we're going to look at reversals, adjustments, and voids. Now, before we look at these, I just want to define these terms as it relates to room key and room key functions. So when you reverse or reversal function in room key is going to refund the full payment amount, and both the original payment and the reversal will be moved to folio 9. So it's kind of like an undo button or the ability to fix an error, a posting error, for example. Now, an adjustment allows you to refund a portion of the payment. It does not move the transaction, so any adjustments, whether you do a full refund or a partial refund using the adjustment or adjust tool, both the original payment and the adjustment will appear as separate line items on the guest folio or whatever designated folio you're using. Those will not be hidden. Lastly, the void function. This allows you to take money that has been placed on hold using the authorization process and manually release that hold from Roomkey. So the void does not do anything with payments, but it does allow you to release or manually release that authorization hold that we looked at or authorizations that we looked at previously there. So the refund and the void functions are a little bit different when we're working with a manual processor. I'm going to show you the manual processes first, and then we'll take a look at the interface and embedded solutions second. So here we have our standalone credit card machine. Um, to issue a refund using a manual processor like this standalone machine, you're going to use the machine itself to process a negative payment first. Then in Roomkey, you're going to record a negative payment with the authorization code. You will not be using any of the reverse adjust or void features in order to refund a payment using a manual processor. So this video here in step 2 is going to show you how you can record a negative payment with an authorization code in Roomkey. For this guest here, Michael Burkich, on the guest folio, you'll see that there is a Visa payment and a MasterCard payment. Now, the guest originally used Visa to pay, but they've changed their mind. They want to use MasterCard, so we now need to refund this Visa. You can right click on the credit card info, the payment amount, just to review the details of the credit card that was used, and then you can click post payment. Here in the post payment window, you want to make sure that you are using the same credit card. So you're refunding this amount, and you'll notice that this amount is a negative. Then you'll record the approval code or authorization code that appeared on the standalone machine, and you'll click OK Exit. This will now record a refund back to that original Visa credit card so that folio is now balanced. Again, with this refund, you can right click and select credit card info to review the details of that refund, including the authorization that was recorded. Great. So issuing a refund using a manual processor is very similar to recording a payment or taking a payment using a manual processor. The only difference is that with a refund, you are processing a negative payment and then you're recording the negative payment in Roomkey with the auth code. Now, with the manual processor, if you are going to void an authorization, again, authorizations are not recorded in Roomkey. It is actually used to manage the credit limit in Roomkey. So all of the processing is actually done on the standalone machine. You'll use your standalone credit card machine to void the authorization. And that's where, again, it's really helpful to have a record of the authorization receipt that prints out from that standalone machine stapled to the guest reg card so that you can always reference how that authorization is being managed and reconcile that with the machine itself. So if you are going to void an authorization, a new receipt will print from your credit card machine. I recommend that you also staple that record to the guest registration card for reference. Now, in Roomkey, like I said, it's not recorded as an authorization. Instead, we're going to manage the guest credit limit. So the second step in Roomkey is to manually record the guest credit limit as a negative in Roomkey. So if you've already voided using the manual processor in step 1, step 2 here, I'll show you how you can record that, manage the guest credit limit. So with this guest, we have a credit limit on file of $100. An additional $100 is available for their reservation. We've already voided that on the machine, so now we'll go to the transactions menu, select guest folio credit limit. And we're going to use the available field to enter a negative credit amount. So I'm going to enter negative $100 and click post. You'll notice that that now changes my available credit to 0. And here in the summary, I'll see that available credit is now recorded as 0 as well. Great. So, a couple things to keep in mind whenever you're managing authorizations and you're using that standalone or manual credit card machine. Now, to take a look at some of these functions, the reverse adjust and void functions, when you have an interface solution or our embedded Roomkey PMS payments processor, Let's take a look at reversing a payment first. Now, you can still record a negative payment in Roomkey, but I recommend utilizing the functions that are already available to you. That is the reverse adjust functions available. So we'll take a look at how to reverse a payment first. We're going to use the reverse function to process a refund. So for this guest, Tasha Leclerc, I can see that MasterCard payment is on file. And you can right click on this payment line item and select reverse. This is now going to allow you to reverse the full amount. You do need to enter a reason as to why you are reversing this. So I'm just noting here that it is a posting error and it is the wrong amount. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. That will now enable our payment window. And you'll see that this is being performed as a refund. So it's $200 that is going back to the guest credit card. I'll go ahead and click post and I'll get my approval message. Now, what you'll notice is that from the guest folio view, that payment line item is removed. If you use your folio drop-down menu and navigate over to folio 9, this is sometimes called the accounting folio because it is typically viewed by accountants exclusively, but it'll show the original payment amount and the reversal here, showing the reason that I reversed it, which was the wrong amount. Now, these postings will still show up on your transaction register balance. I'll just use the detail with guest names. So this is still recorded in Roomkey for reporting purposes, but it just keeps your folio nice and clean for guest purposes. So down here in the MasterCard section, I can see that reversal is recorded alongside the original payment made on Tasha Leclerc's reservation. So that is the reverse function. Like I said, I recommend using that if you make a mistake or if you process the wrong amount. It just makes it really nice and easy to kind of keep a nice clean folio for the guest viewing. Now, the other option is to use adjustment to adjust a payment instead of reversing the full amount. Now, when you use the adjustment button, you can choose to reverse the full amount and give a full refund, or you can just reverse a portion of the amount. This example will actually use the full amount, but what you'll notice is that once we complete the process, it does not remove the transactions. Both the original transaction and the refund will be visible to the guest. So here for this guest, Ariel Clark, you can see that they have a restaurant charge, a Visa payment for that restaurant charge, and then you can see that the original restaurant charge was adjusted as a complimentary meal. So we want to make sure that we're adjusting that payment back to the guest as well. So here I'm going to right click and select adjustment. This is going to give us our refund window, and this is where you can choose how much from the original amount you want to refund. In this case, I'm going to refund the full amount, so I'll enter in 49.76. And similar to the reversal function, you do need to enter a reason. Just be mindful that the guest will see anything that you type in this field because it does still appear on their guest folio. So I'll just say that this is a complimentary meal and click OK. Now this is going to enable our payment window and we're going to refund that full amount, the 49.76 back to the guest credit card. You'll go ahead and click post and you'll receive your approval pop-up. There we go. You can click OK on that approval window and you'll now see the original payment remains on screen as well as the new adjustment. So that's refunding that 49.76 back to the guest credit card. You can right click on that payment and you can review that authorization number and information directly in Roomkey. Now let's take a look at the void process using an interface system or our embedded solution with Roomkey PMS payments. We have already looked at the ability to settle an authorization. This is going to look at the ability to void an authorization. Let's take a look at this video here that'll show a short recreation of how to do that in Roomkey. So I have this guest here. They have a credit MasterCard on file that they've used for their original authorization, but they want to change the authorized credit card. So we're going to go to transactions, authorized transactions, and we're going to void this MasterCard authorization. So you'll click the void button. This will enable our payment window and let us know that we're actually going to void an authorization, and it's going to credit that back to the credit card on file, the MasterCard. I'll get an approval message here and you can click OK. You'll notice that that amount now goes back to the master, or that authorization has been released. Now I can quickly change the credit card on file. Let me just do that here. Excellent. So I just cut that out, but I just have changed the credit card on file to the guest preferred credit card, this Visa credit card. I'm going to go back to the transactions menu, select guest folio credit limit. And now I want to use the Visa credit card to add credit and authorize. So I'm going to authorize the Visa credit card for room and tax plus $100, so total amount of $287.50. This will now enable my payment window, letting me know that I'm going to be authorizing a new credit card for the $287.50. I'll click post and I'll get my approval code with transaction ID showing that I've authorized using the Visa credit card this time. Now I can go back to my transactions menu, select authorized transactions, and now I can see the difference between these two authorizations. The new authorization using the Visa credit is open versus the old authorization, which was already closed using that void function. So it's not too common that that'll happen, but if you do have a scenario like that where the guest uses one credit card for authorization at check-in, and then sometime during their stay they would like to change the credit card on file or the authorized credit card, you can void the original authorization and then manage the new authorization using the new credit card. So we've looked at a lot of options for processing credit cards, payments, refunds, all the like. Now let's take a look at the reconciliation options. Now, before we look at reconciliation, I just want to define the term reconciliation. The purpose of this process, reviewing all of the credit card payments recorded in Roomkey and make sure they match all the credit card payments recorded on your processor. So we're going to look at this for each payment processing method. Let's start with the manual credit card processor. From the manual credit card processor to reconcile your credit card payments for the day, you're going to generate what's called a batch report or a batch summary directly from the processor itself. So it'll print out similar to receipt here, where it will summarize total amounts recorded for each credit card type with a net total at the bottom. Now in Roomkey, you're going to access the transaction register balance summary report. I recommend using this report as a summary version because it gives you that summarized total in the payment section. So this makes it really easy to compare the report in Roomkey transaction register balance to your batch report from your manual credit card processor. You'll take a look at the totals for each credit card type, so Visa, MasterCard, debit, etc., and also make sure that the net total for the payments matches the net total for your batch report as well. Now, if there is a discrepancy between any of these totals, for example, if your debit cards do not match between these two reports, it means that you need to either record a new payment using your credit card processor, or you need to record a payment in Roomkey. Now, if you're not sure which payment is missing, you can use a variation of this transaction register balance report in Roomkey to see the detail version. So it's going to be transaction register balance. Instead of selecting summary, you'll select detail with guest names. And that will give you the detailed breakdown of all of the payments recorded within this summarized report. And that should allow you to then find where the discrepancy is between your batch report and your transaction register balance or TRB report in Roomkey. But ideally, you would always have these totals match, so you know that everything that has been recorded in your batch on your manual processor is also accurately recorded in Roomkey. The next type of reconciliation we'll look at is when you have a third-party interface processor similar to Shift4. So Shift4 I'm going to use as the example here. From Shift4, you would access your processor portal. Shift4 uses the term Lighthouse Transaction Manager. That's what their portal is called. So you'd have to log into their portal online and access their processing reports from that portal. I believe it's called Current Transactions is the name of the report, or it might be called a batch summary or batch report in Shift4 as well. So once you access that report on the Lighthouse Transaction Manager portal, you will use the same report in Roomkey. That's the Transaction Register Balance Summary report. And once again, you'll manually verify that each of these values match. So make sure that the American Express, the MasterCard, Mystery Card, and Visa credit card amounts match, as well as your final total. You want to make sure that these are matching between the two systems, Lighthouse Transaction Manager reporting and your transaction register balance summary in Roomkey. If there is a discrepancy between any of these amounts, you can use the separate report in Roomkey, the detail with guest names version of this TRB report to view a detailed breakdown of all of those transactions and hopefully determine where a payment is maybe missing between the processor Shift4 and Roomkey itself. Ideally, you would want all of those totals to match, so you'd be manually reconciling between the processor portal and Roomkey. Now, the last set of reconciliation that we'll take a look at is for our embedded payment processor, Roomkey PMS payments. We actually have an automatic reconciliation tool that comes standard with our Roomkey PMS payments solution. And this allows you to do your daily payment reconciliation directly in Roomkey without having to source separate reporting and doing manual comparisons between two separate reports. It all appears on one single report. Because the reconciliation is automatic, we have two processes that we'll look at. First, let's take a look at the daily payment reconciliation. So this is what your front desk or night audit team should be doing every single day throughout their shift there. So here in Roomkey, you'll go to the Reports menu, select Online Reports, and select Payment Reconciliation Report. This will open up the Payment Reconciliation or Transaction Reconciliation Report. It's just a pop-up on screen, so you can expand this to make it a little more useful here. But what this report is going to show you for the last 7 days is all of the reconciliation reports for those days, and it's the automatic reconciliation. Now you can click on a single date and view individual transactions within each category. You can also skip to a specific date. So for example, I might just jump directly to today's date, select Get Transactions, and expand this for my viewing. I'll just use Transaction Detail Total. And then on the right-hand side, you'll click Print Preview. Now, when I say that this is automatically reconciling, I'm just going to show you here on the print view. This is what you can provide to your end of day process because it's going to show you what has been recorded in the hotel and compare that automatically to what has been recorded through the payment processor, Roomkey PMS payments. So you have your hotel total and your payments total, and those are automatically reconciled between the two of them. So those will match. You can then print this report or you can save it as PDF and save it on your externally outside of Roomkey. You always have the ability to go back and look at previous reconciliation dates. We just looked at today's date as the example, but you could always go back and look at previous dates as long as you've had Roomkey PMS payments set up at your property. So that daily payment reconciliation is used for the front desk team to ensure that everything that is recorded in Roomkey is accurately recorded automatically through the processor. Now, for the accounting side of things, instead of reconciling with the payments processed per day, they'll actually be reconciling between the processor and the bank deposit. So, what that means is that the accounting team is actually going to use a separate report that is based off of that payment reconciliation. Instead, it's called the deposit reconciliation report. So, let me show you what this accounting process will look like. So for the accountants, they'll go to the reporting menu, they'll select online processing, and they'll select the deposit reconciliation report. This is what they'll use to reconcile with bank deposits that are deposited into the hotel bank account. So very similar to the payment or transaction reconciliation, they'll just expand this window. And you'll notice that these information is based off of a funding ID. So this is the last funding that was produced for this hotel was yesterday's date. It'll show you what was recorded in the hotel, what was recorded through the processors, and it will also break down any chargebacks or fees that have been applied by the processor, by Full Steam Processing, to show you your net deposit for those dates. Now, the nice thing that I really like about this tool is that because the accountants are going to get a funding ID to compare to, you don't have to search by date. Instead, you can actually search by that direct funding ID that appears in the bank account. So let me just type in an example funding ID here, and I'll click Get Deposit. And that now shows me the exact information that is included in that deposit. So it looks like just a deposit for me, but I can select the transaction detail total and click Print Preview. And this is the report that the accounting team is going to use to reconcile with their bank account. And again, the benefit here is really that it's going to show you the breakdown of the transactions, and it's also going to include any fee information that has been applied by the processor, Full Steam, to then generate the net deposit amount that the accountant would see in the bank account. So that embedded solution is going to give a lot more flexibility. It makes it a lot more straightforward for both the front desk team and the accounting team to perform their reconciliation. Now, with this automated reconciliation, if there ever is a discrepancy, we would identify those discrepancies as non-matching transactions. And I have a couple of videos here that'll show you the different ways that you can resolve those non-matching transactions. We've got three different options that are available with our embedded payment processing solution. So let me show you the smart match first. I've got a little video here that'll show us how to fix a smart match, what it looks like, and how to fix it. This video clip will demonstrate how to use Smart Match to fix non-matching transactions. On the payment reconciliation report, Smart Match transactions are grouped together at the top of the screen. These are non-matching transactions that share criteria with other non-matching transactions. For example, we have a transaction recorded in the hotel database that is missing an authorization number and transaction ID. And in the Roomkey PMS payment processor, we have a similar transaction recorded with an authorization number and a transaction ID. These transactions share up to 5 similar criteria that can be viewed when you hover on this match points icon. Here, I can see that all 5 criteria match between these transactions, and I am confident that we can proceed with this match. To complete the match, click on the Match All Selected Transactions button. Once the transactions are successfully matched, you will receive a confirmation message. You can now view the matched transactions in today's batch below. Transactions that have been manually matched using the Smart Match tool will appear with an M icon next to the transaction. When you hover on this icon, you can see when the match was made and the clerk ID that completed the match. So if the non-matching transactions do not qualify for a smart match, we do have other options to create a manual match. And that video here is going to show you how you can create a manual match without the smart match option.
This video clip will demonstrate how to fix non-matching transactions when the payment does not appear in the Roomkey PMS payment processor. On the payment reconciliation report, non-matching transactions are grouped together at the top of the screen in blue. For example, we have a transaction here for Abby Craig recorded in the hotel database that is missing an authorization number and transaction ID. And it is also missing a corresponding transaction in the payment processor. To begin, I'm going to follow the instructions in the section header. So I'm going to click on the transaction to create a match. In this pop-up, I can see the folio details for this guest, Res ID 1292. This is exactly what we see when we look at this guest folio in Roomkey. Here, if I right-click on this payment and select credit card info, I can see that the payment is missing the authorization number and transaction ID. So back here in the reconciliation report, because this payment is recorded in the hotel database but not yet in the processor, I'm going to click the Create Full Steam Transaction button. Once approved, I receive this pop-up confirming the authorization code and transaction ID details. You will see that this transaction disappears from this list of non-matching transactions, and you can now view the matched transactions in today's batch below. Transactions that have been manually matched will appear with an M icon. When you hover over this icon, you can see when the match was made and the clerk ID that completed the match. After the transaction is fixed, I can go back to the guest folio in Roomkey. Here, if I right-click on the payment and select Credit Card Info, I can see that the authorization number and transaction ID information has been updated automatically. Now let's see how to fix non-matching transaction when the payment does not appear on the hotel database. On the payment reconciliation report, non-matching transactions appear at the top in blue. In this example, we have a transaction in the Roomkey PMS payment processor that is missing a corresponding transaction record in the hotel database. To begin, I'm going to follow the instructions in the section header and click the transaction to create a match. In this pop-up, I can see the details for this guest, Res ID 1285, and I can see that there is a room charge for the amount that looks similar to the payment recorded in the payment processor. Now this transaction is on folio 2, so I'm going to create a matching transaction in Roomkey, but I'm going to make sure that it appears in the correct location using this drop-down list to select folio 2. Now I can select the Create Matching Roomkey Transaction button. Once that is successfully posted, I will get a pop-up message. You will see that this transaction disappears from the list of non-matching transactions, and you can now view the matched transaction in today's batch below. Transactions that have been manually matched will appear with an M icon. When you hover over the icon, you can see when the match was made and the clerk ID that completed the match. After the transaction is fixed, I can view the guest folio in Roomkey. Here, I can use the drop-down menu to select Folio 2 and see the room charge and payment transaction I created. If I right-click on the payment and select Credit Card Info, I can see the complete details of this payment, including authorization number and transaction ID.
The last option that we have in order to fix non-matching transactions is a scenario where you may ignore a non-matching transaction.
This video will demonstrate how to ignore non-matching transactions. On the payment reconciliation report, non-matching transactions appear grouped together at the top in blue. In this example, I have two non-matching transactions. Both are recorded in the hotel database, and they do not have corresponding transactions appearing in the payment processor. For the first transaction, I can see that a payment was made, and then 1 minute later, the same amount was refunded back to the same credit card. Now, because neither of these transactions were processed through Roomkey PMS payment processor, I am confident that we can ignore both transactions. To begin, I'm going to follow the instructions in the section header and click the transaction to ignore. In this pop-up, you can review the details of the guest folio. But since I am confident that this can be ignored, I will go directly to the top right corner and click the Ignore Roomkey Transaction button. Once this is ignored, you will see the success message pop up. Then you will repeat this process for the second transaction. Click the transaction, then click the Ignore Roomkey Transaction button and wait for the pop-up message. Transactions that have been manually ignored will disappear from this screen, but they will not appear in the reconciled batches below. Instead, to view them, click the Show Ignored Transactions checkbox. Ignored transactions will continue to be categorized as non-matching transactions, and they will have an eye icon next to them. When you hover on this icon, you can see when the transaction was ignored and the clerk ID that ignored it. If you ignored a transaction by mistake, you can click the transaction, and then in this pop-up, you have the option to select Remove Roomkey Transaction from Ignore List.
Excellent. So you can see that with our embedded solution, not only do we give you that automatic reconciliation tools for deposits and daily reconciliation, but we also give you these solutions in order to remedy any non-matching transactions or any discrepancies between that automated or automatic reconciliation there. One last thing that I would like to make note of is the access to processor portals. I did mention it when we were talking about our third-party interface solution, as well as our embedded Roomkey PMS payment solution. We do have access to those processor portals from Roomkey. Obviously, we do not work with any processor portals for non-integrated or manual standalone credit card machines. But if you do have a third-party interface processing credit cards, or you are using our Roomkey VMS payment solution, you can go to the Reports menu. In the Online Processing section, you'll see the Processor Portal as an option. If you're using an interface solution like Shift4, this will direct you to the Lighthouse Transaction Manager login page. So you will have to enter in your own login information, but it will give you access to that page directly without having to navigate to that on a separate browser. If you are using our Roomkey PMS payment solution, we actually provide direct single sign-on access to the merchant track directly using your Roomkey PMS payments login. So you don't have to enter a separate login. This will log you directly into the processor portal. So to summarize our presentation for today, we did go through a lot of information, but I just wanted to give a bit of a comparison between three processing methods that we've looked at for today's different methods and processes inside Roomkey. For a manual processor, this is going to be a standalone machine where it requires you to manually process payments, refunds, authorizations. You also have to manually reconcile between the processor and Roomkey reporting, and we do not provide portal access because it is separate and not connected to Roomkey. For third-party interface solutions, we do provide integrated processing for payments and refunds and authorizations. However, the manual reconciliation is still required, so you'd still need to manually reconcile from your reporting available on the processor side, comparing those to the reporting inside Roomkey. But to help make that process a little bit easier, we do provide that portal login access, so you can quickly access the tools that you need to compare and reconcile at the end of your day. Now, if you're working with our payments solution, fully embedded with Roomkey, we offer that integrated processing for payments, refunds, and authorizations. We also offer that automatic reconciliation using the payment reconciliation report and our deposit reconciliation report, as well as those tools that we just looked at to resolve any issues directly on the reporting without having to manually search through separate reports to find a solution. And then, of course, we do also make it a little bit easier to access that portal using that single sign in option. Now, if you're interested in changing your payment processing tool that you currently have, you can reach out to our inside sales manager, Michael Mitchell. He can be contacted via email. His contact information is on screen here. He'd be happy to talk to you about these different options if you'd like to change to a new option for your property. So I know that we went a little bit over time, but I just wanted to open up the floor to see if there's any remaining questions regarding our payment processing and reconciliation options with Roomkey. And take a look at our Q&A here. Excellent. So it looks like there's no outstanding questions. William has been able to answer the questions so far. I'll just leave the floor open a little bit longer if you would like to type in a question using the Q&A button. I'm happy to answer as well. Great. So we have a question just typed in there regarding authorizations. It says, usually authorizations automatically get released after 14 days. If a guest stays more than 14 nights, will Roomkey release the authorization automatically prior to guest checkout? It does happen for authorizations for guests that are long-term stays, so that authorization will release. You do have the ability to use the credit limit to increase the authorization. So you can retake the authorization as well. So that is an option. We saw that the ability to manually increase authorization in today's presentation. The other option that I do see properties will use, if you have long-term stay guests, what you might want to do instead of relying on the authorization process for guests that are staying, let's say, 3 weeks or for multiple months, what you might do instead is actually process a payment. So you can let the guest know that at the end of every 14 days, you will process payment and actually settle that payment, and then take a new authorization for the next 2 weeks, let's say. So that's another good option there. Um, Hopefully that helps out with those questions. I know that Camille, you mentioned that that was for the full Steam option directly. That is also true for third-party interface solutions like Shift4. Excellent. So I think those were the only outstanding questions. Thank you to everyone for sticking around for today's presentation. I do appreciate your participation as well. I'll go ahead and close down our meeting for today. You'll receive a notification once this recording becomes available on our support website. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon and enjoy the rest of your day.